Hi, everybody. So here we are. I'm going to read another papal encyclical. And for those that are new in this channel, I try to do the best I can to teach the Catholic doctrine. And I figured that a way to do it is by reading the pre-Vatican, so before Vatican II popes documents, sometimes papal bulls, sometimes papal encyclical, like this one we're going to read today, and catechize ourselves since Vatican II, this hasn't happened. And because I care for the salvation of our souls, I figured that reading and discussing these papal encyclicals and papal bulls is what we can do to help each other. It's not so much discuss, it's perhaps give some comments when I read, but comments from things, perhaps other papal encyclicals I read or other documents that I'm aware of. Because as we know, the papal teachings, right, through Catholic popes do not commit any error. And in regards of faith and moral, in regards of the Catholic faith. What we see nowadays, obviously, is not Catholic because they don't teach the true Catholicism, the ones taught throughout millennia. So the one that we are reading now. So the past few ones I have read, they all are regarding about secret societies, because these secret societies, from when they started on the 1700s and the more modernized arrangement, let's put it like that, the popes have been very vocal. And this one, Qui Pluribus, by Pope Pius IX in 1846, on faith and religion, is another encyclical that talks a lot about them, about the secret society, but also what they have been teaching and spreading. And the next one, the Humano Genus from Pope Leo XIII, that one is my favorite on this topic. But all the ones I have been reading from Clement XII to now, this is the 7th one, they all cover the most, they all they all teach us how to spot the secret societies, not only by how they organize, which in the beginning is more what they focus on, but as you will see in this one, there'll be a lot about their philosophies and how they think and what they do and how they act, which is also important. And even more in the next one, we're going to find out a lot about their, I don't want to say plan, because when Pope Leo XIII wrote what, he wrote that like over hundreds of years ago, like what, 100 and I don't know, 130 years ago, something like that. But it's like it's all there. So once you start learning about how they think, how they act, now 2026, we can spot it very clearly, their fruits in our society, So here we go. So the name in Latin is Qui Pluribus, which means who is more, about faith and religion, by Our Excellency Pope Pius IX in 1846. And he addresses this to all patriarchs, primates, archbishops, and bishops. This was the encyclical he sent to them. Venerable brothers, we greet you and give you our apostolic blessing. And for those that are new, I am originally from Brazil, so I do have an accent, and I apologize for that. But I apologize for my accent throughout the reading. But I'm just trying to do my best and share all this information with anyone who is ready to hear them. For many years past, we strove with you, venerable brothers, to devote our best powers to our episcopal office, an office full of labor and worry. We strove to feed those committed to our care on the mountains of Israel, at its streams and its richest pastures. Our illustrious predecessors, Gregory XVI, which is the one who I read the encyclical before this one, whose famous actions were recorded in the annals of the Church in letters of gold, will surely be remembered and admired by future generations. Absolutely correct, because his his words were very wise and turned to be very much truth. Everything he wrote. Now, though, upon his death, by the mysterious plan of divine providence, we have been raised to the supreme pontificate. We did not purpose this, nor expect it. Indeed, our reaction is great disquietude and anxiety. For if the burden of an apostolic ministry is rightly considered to be at all times exceedingly heavy and beset with dangers, it is to be dreaded most particularly in these times, which are so critical for the Christian commonwealth. I have mentioned this in a previous video, but I will mention it again. Every time a pope mentions Israel in Catholicism, Israel, the new Israel, is the Catholic Christians, right? So that is interesting to keep in mind. So whenever they are referring to Israel, is the Catholics that they are referring to. Paragraph 2. We are well aware of our weaknesses. So, when we reflect on the most serious duties of the Supreme Apostolate, especially in a period of great instability, we should simply have fallen into great sadness. We did not place all our hopes in God, who is our Savior, for he never abandons those who hope in him. Time and again, so as to demonstrate what his power can accomplish, he employs weak instruments to rule his church. In this way, all men may increasingly realize that it is God himself who governs and protects the church with his wonderful providence. We are also greatly supported by the comforting consideration that we have you, venerable brothers, as our helpers and companions in the work of saving souls. For since you have been called to share a portion of our care, you strive to fulfill your ministry with attentiveness and zeal, and to fight the good fight. Paragraph 3. For this reason, as soon as we are placed, despite our unworthiness, on this high seat of the Prince of the Apostles, as the representative of our blessed Peter, and received from the eternal Prince of Pastors himself the most serious divinely given office of feeding and ruling not only the lambs, that is, the whole Christian people, but also the sheep, that is, the bishops. We surely had no greater wish than to address you all with deep feeling of love. Therefore, since we have now assumed the supreme pontificate in our Latin basilica, we are sending this letter to you without delay, in accordance with the established practice of our predecessors. Its purpose is to urge that you keep the night watchers over the flock entrusted to your care with the greatest possible eagerness, wakefulness, and effort, and that you rise a protecting wall before the house of Israel. Again, the Catholics. Do this as you battle with episcopal strength and steady fast, like good soldiers of Christ Jesus, against the hateful enemy of the race, of the human race. Paragraph 4. Each of you has noticed, venerable brothers, that a very bitter and fearsome war against the whole Catholic commonwealth is being stirred up by men bound together in lawless alliance. Here we are talking 1846. So remember, especially during the pontificate of Pope Gregory XVI, there has been happening a lot of revolutions on the following of the French Revolution in the 1789. Right, so they're continuing here. These men do not preserve sound doctrine, but turn their hearing from the truth. They eagerly attempt to produce from their darkness all sorts of prodigious beliefs, and then to magnify them with their strength, and to publish them and spread them among ordinary people. We shudder indeed and suffer bitter pain when we reflect on all their outlandish errors and their many harmful methods, plots, and contrivances, meaning plans. These men use these means to spread their hatred for the truth and light. They are experienced and skillful in deceit, which they use to set in motion their plans to quench people's zeals for piety, justice, and virtue, to corrupt morals, to cast all divine and human laws into confusion, and to weaken and even possibly overthrow the Catholic religion and civil society. For you know, venerable brothers, that these bitter enemies of the Christian name are carried wretchedly along by the blind momentum of their mad impiety. They go so far in their rash imagining as to teach without blushing, openly and publicly, daring and unheard of doctrines, thereby uttering blasphemies against God. They teach that the most holy mysteries of our religions are fictions of the human invention, and that the teaching of the Catholic Church is opposed to the good and the prerogatives of human society. They are not even afraid to deny Christ Himself and God. Yeah, so for anybody who study, especially the Renaissance, Illuminism era, it was very common, this idea that the church was opposed to human development, to human society as a whole. You know, I was taught in Brazil that the church just wanted to hold everything to themselves, to the power and control. That was literally openly taught. Paragraph 5. In order to easily mislead the people into making errors, deceiving particularly the imprudent and the inexperienced, they pretend that they alone know the ways to prosperity. They claim for themselves without hesitation the name of philosophers. Mhm. They feel as if philosophy, which is wholly concerned with the search for truth in nature, ought to reject those truths which God Himself, the supreme and merciful creator of nature, has deigned to make plain to men as a special gift, meaning they reject God's revelation, right? So they are philosophers, which the term it truly means is study of nature, right? The ones that search for truth in nature, but they themselves negate God's revelation. God's revelation, in a way, and this is just me explaining, when God reveals a truth, it's because perhaps it's too complex for us to understand the whole mechanism, how it works. So he just goes there and tells us and let us know. So they're saying these philosophers that are meant to be looking for the truth in nature, right, do reject the truth that comes from God, right? The revelation that comes from God. So clearly showing how absurd it is. Continuing. With this truth, mankind can gain true happiness and salvation. So, by means of an obviously ridiculous and extremely specious kind of argumentation, these enemies never stop invoking the power and excellence of human reason. They raise it up against the most holy faith of Christ, and they blather, which means talk foolishly in length, right? They blather with great foolhardiness that this faith is opposed to human reason. So here he's explaining how these enemies, which all come from the secret societies, right? Um, or are at the very least is sponsored by, uh, never stop saying how amazing human reason is, how our minds, our reasoning, right, our intelligence, and then they go against the faith, the holy faith taught by Jesus Christ. So he's just putting in simple terms really how foolish they are by trying to do that. But unless you have faith, unless you understand and you keep reading these documents, like I invite you to do, this is all given to us at face value from, I don't know, first grade. And that is where the trap is, because we are living a religion that is divine. Divine. Catholicism is divine because it was founded by Jesus Christ. And now, Vatican II, we are in a humanist religion, right? And Pope Gregory XVI, previous video, spoke specifically about that, how there is this trying to make it better, something that is already perfect, is just really switching a divine, a religion that is divine by a human, the religion, which is what we see now in every parish. Anyways, paragraph 6. Without doubt, nothing is more insane than such a doctrine. Nothing is more impious or more opposed to the reason itself could be devised. For although faith is above reason, no real disagreement or opposition can ever be found between them. This is because both of them, faith and reason, right, come from the same greatest source of unchanging and eternal truth, God. So I'm going to read this again in paragraph 6. Without doubt, nothing more insane than such a doctrine. Nothing more impious or more opposed to reason itself could be devised. For although faith is above reason, no real disagreement or opposition can ever be found between them. This is because both of them come from the same greatest source of unchanging and eternal truth, God. So I repeated unchanging twice on purpose because so much has changed since Vatican II. And every single pope alerted us how Catholicism does not change. The truth, the eternal truth is one, and it doesn't change. Continue paragraph 6. They give such a reciprocal help to each other that they give such reciprocal help to each other that true reason shows, maintains, and protects the truth of the faith, while faith frees reason from all errors and wondrously enlightens, strengthens, and perfects reason with the knowledge of divine matters. I'm going to repeat it again. They give such a reciprocal help, and whoever they talking here, faith and reason, okay? They give such a reciprocal help to each other that true reason shows, maintains, and protects the truth of faith, while faith frees reasons from all errors and wondrously enlightens, strengthens, and perfects reasons with the knowledge of divine matters. So they cannot go against each other. Paragraph 7. It is no less deceit, venerable brothers, that other enemies of the divine revelation, with reckless and sacrilegious infantry, insolence meaning, want to import the doctrine of human progress into the Catholic religion. So they were trying to make it Catholicism a human religion, right? To infect with that. Since then, they eventually did it in Vatican II. They extol it with the highest praise, as if religion itself were not of God, but the work of man, or a philosophical discovery which can be perfected by human means. The charge with Tertullian justly made against the philosophers of his own time, who brought, quote, who brought forward a Stoic and Platonic and a dialectal Christianity, unquote, can very aptly apply to those men who rave so pitiably. Our holy religion was not invented by human reason, but was most mercifully revealed by God. Therefore, one can quite easily understand that religion itself acquires all its powers from the authority of God, who made the revelation, and that it can never be arrived at or perfected by human reason. Guys, I think I need to read this again because it's so important. Our holy religion was not invented by human reason, but was most mercifully revealed by God. Therefore, one can easily understand that religion itself acquires all its powers from the authority of God, who made the revelation, and that it can never be arrived at or perfected by human reason. In order not to be deceived or go astray in a matter of such great importance, human reason should indeed carefully investigate the fact of divine revelation. Having done this, one would be definitely convinced that God has spoken and therefore would show him rational obedience, as the apostle very wisely teaches. And then they quote a passage. I think it's Paul. Let me see, because that one is important. They have other quotes that I'm not necessarily saying, but this one I like it very much. Romans 13:3. For who can possibly not know that all faith should be given to the words of God, and that it is in the fullest agreement with the reason itself to accept and strongly support doctrines which it has determined to have been revealed by God, who can neither deceive nor be deceived. This paragraph 7, very important. Listen again if you want. Paragraph 8. But how many wonderful and shining proofs are ready at hand to convince the human reason in the clearest way that the religion of Christ is divine, and that the quote, the whole principle of our doctrine has taken root from the Lord of the heavens above, unquote. Therefore, nothing exists more definite, more settled, and more holy than our faith, which rests on the strongest foundations. This faith, which teaches for life and points toward salvation, which casts out all vices and is fruitful mother and nurse of the virtues, has been established by the birth, life, death, resurrection, wisdom, wonders, and prophecies of Christ Jesus, its divine author and perfecter, shining forth in all directions with the light of teaching from on high and enriched with the treasures of heavenly wealth, This faith grew famed and notable by the foretellings of so many prophets, the illustrious so many miracles, the steady fast of so many martyrs, and the glory of so many saints. It made known the saving laws of Christ and gaining in strength daily, even when it was most cruelly persecuted. It made its way over the whole world by land and sea, from the sun's rising to its setting, under the single standard of the cross. The deceit of idols was cast down, and the mist of errors was scattered. By the defeat of all kinds of enemies, this faith enlightened with divine knowledge all people, races, and nations, no matter how barbarous and savage, or how different in characters, moral law, and ways of life. It brought them under the sweet yoke of Christ Himself by proclaiming peace and good tidings to all men. This is another thing, very important, paragraph number 8. This is another thing we have not been taught for decades. Everybody talks about the white European, the Portuguese, the Spanish. I'm from Brazil, right? And how they were colonizing. They were not perfect. But with that said, there were cannibal tribes in Brazil. How about that? Right? There were plenty of those in Africa too. So, and many other places in East Asia as well, right? So like that's just to be an extreme example. But with that said, what the Catholicism did, right, brought under the sweet yoke of Christ Himself, proclaiming peace and good tidings to all men. Look at the Aztecs. I think they were the ones of very violence. Did plenty of sacrifice. They changed because they became Catholics, because they come under the sweet yoke of Christ Himself. And that's what Catholicism can do to barbarous tribes and groups of people and societies. And it has been under attack for a long time. So that part of the history, you don't learn anymore, you don't focus anymore. 9. Now, surely all these events shine with such divine wisdom and power that anyone who considers them will easily understand that the Christian faith is the work of God. Human reason knows clearly from these striking and certain proofs that God is the author of this faith. Therefore, it is unable to advance further, but should offer all obedience to this faith, casting aside completely every problem and hesitation. Human reason is convinced that it is God who has given everything that faith possesses to man for belief and behavior. The human reason is convinced that it is God who has given everything the faith proposes. I made a mistake in there. To man for belief and behavior. 10, paragraph 10. This consideration too clarifies the great error of those others as well who boldly venture to explain and interpret the words of God by their own judgment, misusing their reason and holding their opinion that these words are like human work. God Himself has set up a living authority to establish and teach the true and legitimate meaning of His heavenly revelation. This authority judges infallibly all disputes which concerns matters of faith and morals, lest the faithful be swirled around by every wind of doctrine which springs from evilness of man in encompassing error. And this living, infallible authority is active only in that church which was built by Christ the Lord upon Peter, the head of the entire church, leader and shepherd, whose faith He promised would never fail. This church has had an unbroken line of successions from Peter himself. These legitimate pontiffs are the heirs and defenders of the same teaching, rank, office, and power. And the church is where Peter is. And the church is where Peter is. And Peter speaks in the Roman pontiff, living at all times in his successors and making judgment, providing the truth of the faith to those who seek it. The divine word therefore mean what this Roman see of the most blessed Peter holds and has held. Now I'm gonna read this many more times because it is very important for the whole point of this channel. The church is where Peter is. But before that, what does this Pope say? Whose faith he promised will never fail. Jesus promised that Peter's faith will never fail. Every Pope is a continuation of Peter. So when people say we need to pray for the conversions of Pope Leo, of Pope Francis, you can't do that because Christ already did that. So if Christ prayed, so the Pope faith never fails, and we clearly see that it does, apparently, right? Because we look at the one dressed in white, and he doesn't hold the Catholic faith. So people are praying for his conversion. It's fine, pray for him. However, he's not the Pope. He can't be the Pope. Because if he was the Pope, he would be faithful. Because Christ prayed for his faith. So we will never fail. This paragraph just once again proves the point that all the Vatican II, post-Vatican II, popes do not hold the Catholic faith. Therefore, they're not Catholics. Therefore, they're not popes. They're not popes. So I recommend reading this again. There is a link to download and read this document on your own. And I want to read one more. It's very short, and then I'm going to end here because it's over 30 minutes already. But this is very clear what we need to hear. Now, paragraph 11 is important too. For this mother and teacher of all churches has always preserved entire and unharmed the faith entrusted to it by Christ the Lord. Furthermore, it has taught it to the faithful, showing all men truth and the path of salvation. Since all priesthood originates in this church, the entire substance of the Christian religion resides there also. The leadership of the Apostolic See has always been active, and therefore, because of its preeminent authority, the whole church must agree with it. The faithful who live in every place, whoever does not gather with this church is constitute the whole church, scatters. This sentence, paragraph, because of this sentence. Whoever does not gather with this church scatters. Everyone who is under those false authorities because they think they are being obedient, they are scattering, they're working against Christ. Because Christ, either you are with his church and working for his church, or you are against it. You can have the best intentions, but if you're not working for his church, you're working against it. If you're working against somebody who calls himself a pope, like Prevost, and then he is in favor of all this madness he is in favor of, which is not Catholic, you're not being more virtuous by saying, oh, but I'm obedient to the pontiff because I have to be obedient. Yes, we Catholics have to be obedient, but we have to be obedient to the legit authority. Otherwise, we are against God. We are working against God. We are working against the church of God. We are scattering. rather than working for it and gathering. Whoever does not gather with the church scatters. That's what you're doing if you are working with them. So I will finish here because I don't want to go beyond that. Next week, I continue on paragraph 12. Okay? And any questions, please let me know. It would be a pleasure to answer any questions. And to those that have ear to hear, I think this is a great, great encyclical, and I recommend everybody to download it and read it. There is a lot that comes by reading these words written by a true pontific, a true representation of Peter, that I believe there are a lot of graces that come by reading that. So I hope you all have a great day. And in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And see you next time.